All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, Senator Rick Braden, 31st Senatorial District, Cass Johnson Bates, bringing forth Senate Bill 115 before the committee. This is one of those things that I've actually, this is, I think, number 5 that I brought this bill forward. It has had some revisions to it, but this would put an end to divisive topics like CRT, DEI type practices, as well as the teaching of revisionist type history curriculum like 1619 Project, those sorts of things. It would also not just say that these sorts of things could not be taught, but it would also ensure, like with history, that things like the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, Federalist Papers. Let me get to the list here of things that would be encouraged to be taught and adopted as the curriculum. Alexis de Tocqueville's Democracy in America, the transcripts of Lincoln-Douglas debate, writings of the Founding Fathers, Civil Rights Act of 1964, the 13th, 14th, 19th Amendments, these sorts of things to be taught. I know there's been a lot of hate and vitriol that's kind of come from both sides on in regards to the subject matter, but in reality, we don't need our kids being taught these sorts of divisive topics. And CRT, as we've even heard in a prior bill, really brings up a lot of vitriol in the way things are being taught. And this would just basically, it puts forth in the bill, and I can get into the nuts and bolts of how it would operate, but it would allow for the State Board of Education, the Attorney General, to have that capability to ensure that these things are being taught and are not being taught. But then also another portion of the bill would be that we're allowing parents to have access to what exactly is being taught. So that's the Sunshine and Learning Act would be a portion of this, and the Parental Bill of Rights, ensuring, I think that would be the best way and the best process to ensure that these sorts of topics aren't being taught, is giving full access and transparency to all curriculum and all subject matter that's put before the students and before their children to ensure these topics aren't being taught. And if they are, it gives that capability for parents and everyone involved in ensuring that a good quality education is happening, to be able to address that and have a say and call it to light. So, I mean, that's basically the crux of the bill, what it entails. I'd be happy to answer any question. I'm sure we'll have ample testimony as to both sides of this topic. So I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the bill sponsor? Senator Nurnberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Senator.
Morning.
As you mentioned, we'll have plenty of folks to weigh in on this, but we've had different iterations of these bills the last few years, and I was in the classroom for 13 years until 2020 when I entered the General Assembly. And one of the things I continue to hear from teachers, and certainly I heard it during my time there, is just really the fear of having so much scrutiny over everything that they consider teaching, especially when it comes to current events. One of the things that we started doing early on was trying to share as much and wanting that parental involvement and putting everything out there. And I think most school districts, especially those who have the means and have different dashboards, have that right now. They want to make sure that parents and guardians are as involved as possible. I remember even, like I said, this is 10 years ago, we had access for parents to be able to sign on and have a parent code so they could go on into all of my classes and see exactly what I was doing. But one of the things that teachers continue to share is that they have so much going on right now. I mean, I had 8 different preps as a high school teacher. I taught 8 different courses in 6 periods. So sometimes I taught 2 in 1. And any of these type of bills that really seek to undermine authority of teachers is simply the final nail in the coffin. We are seeing teachers exiting at a rapid rate, truly a mass exodus in education. One of the things I really appreciate from the current commissioner especially is recognizing just how much we need to ensure that teachers feel supported. And yes, I start with, we want parents to be as involved as possible. I am very supportive of all the sunshine and education type things, but again, at what cost to teachers? And I was going through this. I had those moments of, okay, I need to do this within 24 hours. I need to do this within 48 hours. This needs to be done here. And again, there's just a lot placed on these individuals that are just trying to do their best to educate the students to the best of their ability. And then when any issues do arise, I look at what burden this would place on our local prosecuting attorneys who are tasked with, quite frankly, some really challenging times right now. And they've got a lot of things that they are dealing with, from the most egregious crimes out there to property theft that they want to get a hold of. Same thing with our Attorney General. And I'm just kind of curious as we go through on these conversations as what we can do to continue to incentivize and aid school districts in making sure that they have portals available for parents, whether that's through appropriations or grants. If folks aren't able, or school districts aren't able to do that now, we want to do that. But at the time, again, just with those concerns of an undue burden on folks that are just trying to stay in the classroom and educate our future generation.
No, and I totally agree with that. I mean, the crux of the bill, and my intent is not to burden the teachers. You know, I see this more falling in line of your administration and your school board of having to adopt these sorts of policies. But I agree. I mean, it's not an attempt to try to make the teachers out to be the bad guy or caught in the middle. I just want to make sure that we're adopting these sorts of parameters in which kids are educated. But I would happily try to work with you to see how we can try to make something like this a workable, work towards a workable solution with that. So now, as for we do this with basically any and every law that we pass. We have to give some manner of teeth. Do I see, honestly, a lot of this going to the local prosecutor or even the AG? I really don't, but I think there has to be that level of potential teeth to let these districts know that we mean business and that we want to ensure that these sorts of topics, because if you read of like in the first page of the bill, it's pretty common sense in my approach that we shouldn't be teaching that one race is inherently superior to another. I mean, that's, so we didn't try to get, and that's how I tried to draft this bill, where we're not getting into like the labels of CRT or 1619, just making sure that those parameters and guardrails are in place. That way there is flexibility in the classroom and it's not, pitting everyone in this tiny itty bitty little box. But I'm not trying to filibuster my bill, I apologize. but I just wanted to say that's my vision, but I want to make it a workable solution. I'd love to work with you on that.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you for the conversation. And again, I look forward to working with you on this. I think there's some good stuff we can do in terms of making sure that parents do understand and have a good understanding what's happening in their child's education. That improves outcomes for every student. And so I think that's a great thing. And if we can do anything to help and aid school districts in being able to have some of those tools, I think that sometimes can be very costly, especially when it comes to small school districts, help them there. That's something certainly that I'd like to partner with. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Any more questions for the bill sponsor? Seeing none, could I see the hands of everyone that wants to testify on this bill in favor, opposition? Okay, we got several hands out there. I'm going to ask you, we got about half an hour, so please be as brief as you can. Make sure you got a witness form filled out. Please don't feel the need to repeat points that have already been made. We will start testimony in favor. Who's the first person that'd like to testify in favor of this bill?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, James Harris representing FGA Action, here to testify in support of Senate Bill 115. Most of my remarks and support will be kind of pertaining more to the Parents' Bill of Rights in section 161.1140 and not some of the other parts in section 167.177. I think kind of, promoting parental involvement's good. I think a member of the committee had a good point. Sadly, as my kids get older, I've seen sometimes there's a problem with parents. It's society. Sometimes I've noticed in my daughter's class that parents flip out and they want to blame the teacher. Sometimes they don't know that maybe you have to go, does this rise the level of emailing the teacher, because they're always in life we're going to confront things that are inaccurate. Like a teacher told my daughter something in theology class that was factually inaccurate. We just had a conversation about it. Didn't rise the level of, do I send an email? Kind of annoyed my wife and I. But nonetheless, that doesn't mean we should try to restrict information. I think the Parents' Bill of Rights and stuff, giving parents more information to hopefully help them be more engaged with their children, knowing what's going on is good. I think sadly in society, as things go faster and faster, sometimes it's harder for parents to know everything that's going on. My wife, is probably the rare person that's going through the backpack every day, having a conversation, stuff like that. But why this stuff matters, I think if you look at the National Assessment of Educational Progress, which is known as kind of the nation's report card, it has shown that Missouri children's reading scores have gone down again, and we're now below the national average, and that's alarming. 27% of fourth graders and 26% of eighth grade students scored proficient or above. And so what's my point is I think having more information can hopefully spur conversations about, there's only so many hours in the day. Can all this fit in, or some of this stuff would be nice if we had a 12-hour school day, which we don't, I'm not advocating, but maybe it's not as important as the basic things. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for being here. Thank you for your testimony. Next witness to testify in favor. Anyone else that would like to testify in favor of this bill?
Good morning, I'm Timothy Faber, and I'm in favor of the entire bill, but I especially like the Sunlight in Learning portion because parents are the ones who are ultimately responsible for educating their children. Both of my parents were school teachers. They did so in the days before computers. I can remember my dad sitting up late at night grading papers, writing lesson plans, but he was always very open with the parents anytime anybody had questions. Computer technology makes that easier, and there's really no reason not to use it. So keeping the parents informed about what their children are learning and the curriculum that's being used, I just think is a kind of a no-brainer. And I would also think that any school that would try to hide such information is suspect. So.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for being here. Thank you for your testimony. Next witness in favor. Who else would like to testify in favor of this bill? All right, seeing no one. Who would like to testify in opposition of this bill?
Senator Brad? Good, thank you. Nimrod Chapel on behalf of the Missouri State Conference. I can tell you that there are a lot of issues that this bill brings up. I mean, in particular, that we are going to take away the academic freedom that belongs to educators to ensure that they bring forth lessons plans that are improved by the district, that are in line with the educational opportunities that should be offered at an institution. As a child also of educators, I think that that's important. Generations of educators have not only sought the training, but worked hard and diligently to be able to provide accurate information. Here, we're not restricting information on the basis of whether or not it's true. We're just trying to decide whether or not we like it, right? To purposely exclude, in law, teaching any information related to 1619, which is really just a historical perspective on America, seems ridiculous. I mean, especially coming from a state like Missouri, who has such bad history, right? First state in the United States to ever have a travel advisor issued by the NAACP. I think that says something, because you have a whole group of citizens who have historically and are currently disenfranchised, treated so bad by the government that they fund with their tax dollars that we were put on par with Myanmar, right? Doesn't matter whether you're driving down the street because you can't have your rights to go where you need to go. Doesn't matter whether you're in school or whether you go to the hospital. Your outcomes are quantifiably below everybody else in the state. Now just let that sink in. At the same time that we recognize these historic disparities, right, we take away a bridge to prosperity under Governor Parsons' revocation of the executive order in the face of the disparity study that showed that there are significant limitations on the ability of minorities, all minorities, blacks, women, disabled, veterans, everybody, to participate in state-funded contracts to the tune of about $1 billion. So where am I going? What I'm telling you is that Missouri has a whole bunch of problems and that this is not the fix. We're talking about shining a light on the ability of parents to participate in the educational process. Let me tell you what parents want. They want to get what they paid for. They want to be able to send their kids to public schools and get a fair education, one that doesn't hold back entire segments of history, right? You know, I picked up my youngest kid's 5th grade history book, 4 pages dedicated to slavery. 4 pages. Now, do you think that the impact of slavery on the United States, or even in Missouri, or even in mid-Missouri, should be limited or could be limited to 4 pages? It doesn't even make sense. And half of those were pictures. Now, ratchet that up and you think about what it is that we're trying to shine a light on. If we want educational attainment for the Missourians to actually be an issue, then we should spend more money on education, not less, to make sure that rural and urban schools are funded on a real funding mechanism that makes sense, not that thing that we have currently in effect in this state. If we want parents to be engaged, it's not by shining a light supposedly on what they're learning in school, because any parent can still pick up the books just like I do for my kids to ensure that I know what they're talking about. Maybe we spent more time reading to the kids, providing after school and before school programs for all children to ensure that they have an opportunity to understand the information that's being presented to them, to provide fair, free and reduced lunches on an equivalent basis without shaming the kids, to ensure that they can at least have something in their belly so that their minds can focus on the information, then we can participate in the national and global economy that is quickly leaving us behind. You pass this bill and I tell you what's going to happen. 2 or 3 things. One, you're going to promote litigation. Now, as a lawyer, I'm okay with that because I believe in the judicial system and I believe that that's the way that society should work, just like you should pay your taxes. But the second thing that you're going to do is you're going to ensure that an entire generation gets along worse. Now, we know from an economic standpoint that the important thing for societies, communities, states, whatever, to be able to do is to have a healthy, educated public that gets along. Missouri is failing in all 3. This doubles down on the failing part. You're going to ensure that an entire generation, generations of kids have no idea on how to address historic disparities, how to treat each other with kindness and respect, or how to even love each other as we've been taught to do. I think you can do way better than this.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for being here. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, sir.
Next person to testify in opposition of this legislation.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Otto Fajan on behalf of Missouri NEA. We'll be very brief, speak to our opposition. I think we would first, kind of broadly speaking, caution the committee to consider what the comments that Senator Byrne made. We've had a concern all these years that legislation of this type is likely to have an exacerbating influence on the challenges we're facing in teacher recruitment and retention. We've actually seen in this last year a little bit of progress with the passage of language from sponsored by Representative Lewis that ultimately went into Senate Bill 727 on teacher pay. We've seen some increases in some of the indicators we look at in terms of students coming in to become teachers and how districts are able to hold on to their teachers. These kinds of bills, especially in the kind of in the form that we see right here in Senate Bill 115, likely to really kind of have a heavy effect on teachers wanting to be in. You know, what we really are seeing is in the face of our teachers is the issues like in the previous bill, talking about cell phones, headphones, distraction, disruption in the classroom. That's the day-to-day that teachers are really dealing with. But if maybe the Senate committee is not as familiar with this, but the House committee a couple of years ago spent about a dozen weeks hearing many different variations of this bill. There was a lot of testimony, a lot of conversation about the language. One of the things that came out of that was that the House committee really stayed away from anything that says in state law, schools shall not teach, and then use the word concept. For example, this bill has some of that language, says schools shall not teach divisive concepts. Divisive concepts includes the idea that one race is inherently superior to another. Well, there have been occasions in human history, for example, Nazi Germany and the Third Reich, where that was something that was a concept in the culture. So the committee chose to avoid anything that says shall not teach about and then use the word concept, because it ends up invariably being profoundly overbroad and very problematic for instruction. So there's a lot of work that could potentially be done. We've been involved with folks on the House side, less work on the Senate side thus far, but if there's interest in that, our association stands ready to discuss what this language should, if anything, look like. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for being here. Thank you for testimony. Next witness to testify in opposition to this legislation. I'm going to ask witnesses to please keep their testimony to 2 minutes or less. So we need to wrap this up. We want to give you all a chance to talk, but we're on a time constraint here. So proceed,
One
please.
better, Mr. Chair. Sharon Galway Jones here today on behalf of Provo, Missouri, in opposition to the bill. I'm not going to retread ground. I just want to also point out that this bill contains some language regarding trans athletes and or, as the bill defines it, men playing on teams reserved for females. That's language that we've already dealt with in the state of Missouri. We don't need to be retreading that ground, and we would ask that we keep this bill to its original intent and not spread it out too far.
Questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for being here. Thank you for your testimony. Next witness to testify in opposition.
David Lee Brush with the Missouri Equity Education Partnership, and we are opposed to this bill, as we have been every time the bill like this has come around since 2022. I'm not going to retread ground either, but there are some parts in section 160.255 that are contradictory. How can we teach about our founding fathers without teaching civic engagement and activism? They were activists. And we're kind of concerned about the word morals. What are the morals of the United States? What morals were at play with enslaved labor, with the Indian Removal Act, with women's suffrage? And how can we talk about the country, the structure of our country with our students if we can't talk about, we can't talk about that without talking about who created the structure and how it was created. We aren't responsible for the past, but we are responsible for the present and the future. And we are still dealing with systems that were put into place in Reconstruction. The founding documents that are listed excludes very important documents like the Dred Scott decision, the Emancipation Proclamation, the writings of Frederick Douglass, the suffragettes, and Dr. King, and all those are kind of oddly all marginalized people. And section 161, the Parents' Bill of Rights, section 161.114, most of these rights already exist. I was a teacher for 25 years. These rights exist, parents just have to activate them, and there's nothing in this bill that applies to private schools or FPEs, which might receive state funding through 727, and that's going to create an accountability disparity between public schools and other schools receiving public money. And the punitive part of this bill is going to drive people out of the classroom. The punitive part for the database bill, part of the bill, is absolutely draconian. And a lot of the, like Representative Nuremberg said, a lot of these things are already in place, but the section on the materials portion, the database, could lead to a lot of micromanaging on the parts of teachers, and that's all we've got. Thank you.
All right. Your time has expired. You got a lot in that 2 minutes, didn't
Hey,
you?
listen, I was a 1AR.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for being here. Thank you for your testimony. Next witness in opposition.
Good morning. I'm Amy Hammerman. I'm a volunteer with National Council of Jewish Women, and I'm here in opposition to this bill. Instead of retreading prior ground, I just thought I would highlight some concerns that we have given the overbroadness of the definitions in the bill. For example, we have seen that other similar actions, I will say, have caused a chilling effect, particularly with regards to punitive enforcement of this bill. We are concerned that schools and school districts, in an effort to prevent themselves from being at liability for being in violation of this bill, will do things like eliminate programs like Girls in the Know that support girls in schools, or the Jewish Student Union, which supports Jewish students in schools, or just as an example, from my own public school district, we have a program called the Meacham Scholars that is open to all students in the middle school, and they focus on teaching Black history in St. Louis. And while there is certainly no intent to teach any child that they should feel guilty, collectively guilty for history, teachers are not necessarily in charge of how students feel when they are confronted with history that is deeply uncomfortable, and we are concerned that trying to forestall violation of this bill will cause programs like this to end when they have been extremely successful and enriching for our students. Thank you.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for being here. Thank you for your testimony. Next witness to testify in opposition, please come forward.
Hi, Senators. Tori Schaefer on behalf of the ACLU of Missouri. I've been speaking on behalf of the ACLU for the past 4 years, and I think every year have spoke against this bill. One year you got to give me a bill that I can testify in support of. Everybody's pretty much covered the points from before. I did want to add that my mom and both my mother-in-law are public school teachers. They've been teaching for nearly 30 years, and they get asked all types of questions from kids. You can never predict what's going to come out of a first grader's mouth. And I think a recent experience that one of those folks have had is, getting asked about like a Super Bowl Sunday show. Why did Kendrick Lamar say 40 acres and a mule? And my question is, if my mother were to answer that question for a student and that conversation were to end up talking about reparations, or maybe some folks believe that it would touch on critical race theory, would she be in violation of this bill? Would that put her public school at risk of losing funds? So I think scenarios like this are really important. Like I said, you can't predict what a kid's gonna say. And in previous years, we have also provided a bunch of case law on the importance of academic freedom and expression, and we're happy to provide that again for the committee. Thank you.
Questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for being here. Thank you for your testimony. Next witness in opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Mike Harris on behalf of the Missouri State Teachers Association, go on record against the legislation, specifically the Sunlight and Learning Act. We just want to make sure that an excessive administrative burden isn't placed on our teachers, and we feel like as currently written that would do so. And happy to work with you and the members of the committee to make sure that doesn't happen. Thank you.
Questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for being here. Thank you for testimony. Next witness in opposition. Is there anyone else here to testify in opposition to this bill? Seeing no one. Is there anyone here to testify for informational purposes only? Seeing no one. Senator, would you like to give some closing remarks?
Yeah, just briefly. So I know in the testimony, everybody's saying we can't talk on divisive concepts. The bill is hinged upon the word in the very first sentence, concepts that promote the following ideas. So it's not saying you can't talk on the Hitler Youth or the terrible history of racism. It's saying that you can't promote these divisive topics that are listed. That's all that it's stating, that it can't be a promotion, that this is good ideology. That's what this bill hinges upon. So I think there's a lot of non-clarity, I guess, muddying of the water of what this bill does, but it's not promoting these divisive concepts. So that's where I think that we kind of lose the reservation on saying that we can't speak on these, because we could. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate that. That will conclude the hearing on Senate Bill 115.